I still remember the exact moment I realized our dreams were no longer compatible. It wasn't during a fight or some dramatic confession. It happened in a quiet kitchen at 2 in the morning, with cold coffee between us and a spreadsheet open on her laptop. We had been together for 6 years by then. We met in college, both broke, both ambitious in different ways we didn't yet understand. Back then, the future was just a blurry idea where love was enough to solve everything. We talked about traveling, about having a small place with plants on the windowsill, about work we didn't hate. We promised each other we would grow together. For a long time, it felt true. After graduation, I took a job at a mid-sized architecture firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. I liked the slow progress of it, the idea that one day I might design something that would outlive me. She went into marketing, bouncing between startups, always chasing the next big opportunity. I admired her hunger for more. She admired my patience. At least, that's what we told ourselves. The first crack appeared when she got an offer in another city. It was a serious step up, better title, better pay, more responsibility. She was glowing when she told me. I remember hugging her and saying I was proud, and meaning it. Then she asked, "So, when can you move?" I hesitated too long. My firm had just put me on a long-term project. Leaving would mean starting over somewhere else, losing momentum I'd spent years building. I suggested we try long distance for a few months. She agreed, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Those months were brutal. We spoke every night, but the conversation slowly shifted from "I miss you" to "I'm exhausted," and "I don't have time right now." She made new friends, new routines. I stayed in our old apartment surrounded by furniture we chose together, wondering when it stopped feeling like home. When she came back to visit, she felt different, more confident, sharper, like someone who had learned how to move faster than I could. We still loved each other, but it felt like trying to hold water in our hands. The second crack came when she started talking about the next step. Not moving back, moving further. "There's this company in another country," she said one night over video call. "It's exactly what I want to do. International campaigns, big clients. This could change everything." I asked her what that meant for us. She said, "It means we need to think bigger than this apartment, bigger than your job, bigger than staying comfortable." That word, comfortable, landed like an insult. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't afraid of work. I just wanted a life that felt balanced, a place to belong. She wanted acceleration, titles, recognition, a career that could take her anywhere, even if anywhere meant away from me. We argued more after that. Not screaming arguments, but quiet, surgical ones. About timelines, about priorities, about whether love should require sacrifice or compromise. Every conversation ended the same way, unresolved, heavy, and postponed. The night in the kitchen came a few weeks later. She was visiting again, and instead of talking about us, she showed me her budget projections. "If I take this offer," she said, pointing at the screen, "I can pay off my student loans in 3 years. 5, and I could buy a place. We wouldn't have to worry anymore." I stared at the numbers and realized I wasn't in them. There was no column for us, no space for weekends together or building something side by side. Her future was efficient and impressive and completely solitary. I asked her if she still wanted the same things we used to talk about. She closed the laptop and looked at me for a long time. "I want more," she said. "And I don't think you do." That hurt more than if she had said she didn't love me. Because she did love me. I could see it in the way her voice shook. But love was no longer enough to bridge the distance between what we wanted from life. We didn't break up that night. We slept in the same bed, back to back, pretending rest could fix what we were too afraid to name. In the morning, she packed her bag carefully, folding clothes like she was practicing for something permanent. At the door, she kissed me and said, "We'll figure it out." I nodded, even though I already knew we wouldn't. When she left again, the apartment felt larger and emptier at the same time. I kept expecting to hear her keys at the door, the soft thud of her bag on the chair, the way she would narrate her day while taking off her shoes. Instead, there was only silence and the hum of the refrigerator. For the first week, we texted like nothing had changed. Good morning messages, photos of our lunches, jokes about the same old TV shows we both still watched. It felt like denial in real time. We were acting out the version of us that existed before that night in the kitchen, as if consistency could reverse reality. Then she started getting busy. Her replies came later, sometimes hours later. Sometimes not at all until the next day, followed by a rushed apology and a message about meetings, deadlines, networking events. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself successful people were just like this. I told myself love meant patience. One evening, after waiting all day for a reply, I called her. She answered on the third ring, breathless. "I'm at a work dinner," she whispered. "Can I call you later?" I heard voices in the background. Laughter. Glasses clinking. A world I wasn't part of. "Sure," I said. "Of course." She never called back. That was the first time I felt something break inside me. A week later, she finally admitted she had accepted the job abroad. She said it casually, like it was a natural continuation of the conversation. "I leave in 2 months," she said. "It's a huge opportunity." I didn't want to scare you before it was official. I didn't know what to say. Congratulating her felt dishonest. Being angry felt selfish. "So, what happens to us?" I asked. There was a pause long enough for me to imagine all the possible answers. "I don't know," she said. "I was hoping we could try. Visit each other. Be flexible." Flexible. Another word that sounded like compromise, but felt like erasure. We tried to make a plan. Flights every few months. Calls on weekends. A vague idea that maybe, someday, one of us would move. But every version of that future required me to abandon my work or her to slow down, and neither of us said that part out loud. The closer her departure date came, the more we avoided talking about it. When she visited for the last time before leaving, we acted like tourists in our own relationship. We went to restaurants we used to love. We took photos. We had sex that felt both desperate and distant. We were trying to store enough memories to survive on later. On her last night, she cried in the shower so I wouldn't hear her. I heard her anyway. At the airport, she held my face in her hands and said, "Promise me this isn't the end." I promised, because saying no would have meant letting her go right there, in front of strangers and departure screens and rolling suitcases. The long-distance version of us lasted 3 months. At first, we tried to keep routines. Sunday calls, voice notes when we missed each other. But her time zone was different, and so was her life. She started talking about people I'd never meet, projects I didn't understand, a pace I couldn't match. When I told her about my day, it sounded small even to me. One night, during a video call, she checked her phone while I was talking. "Sorry," she said. "It's work." I stopped mid-sentence. "You're always at work." She looked offended. "This is what I warned you about. This is who I am now." That sentence stayed with me. Not "this is what I'm doing," but "this is who I am now." As if growth required a replacement. Our arguments became sharper. She accused me of holding her back emotionally. I accused her of leaving me behind. We were both right, and that made it worse. The final fight happened over something stupid. I asked her if she could come home for my birthday. She said it was impossible because of a conference. I said she could try harder. She said I didn't understand her life. I said she didn't want to. There was silence after that. Not the heavy, waiting silence of before, but a clean, decisive one. 2 days later, she called me. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I feel like I'm choosing between you and myself. And I don't want to resent you." I wanted to beg. I wanted to offer to move, to quit my job, to become someone faster and louder and more ambitious. But I knew that version of me wouldn't last. And she knew it too. "So this is it?" I asked. "I think so," she said. "I think our dreams went in opposite directions. We said goodbye like people who still loved each other but no longer belonged to the same future." When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the black screen and didn't recognize the person looking back. The weeks after the breakup felt unreal, like I was living in someone else's routine. I went to work, answered emails, nodded in meetings, and came home to an apartment that no longer smelled like her shampoo. Friends told me I would feel better with time. Time, however, seemed uninterested in helping. It just kept moving forward without her. I avoided the places we used to go together. The cafe on the corner. The park where we once planned imaginary futures. Even the grocery store felt dangerous because I knew exactly which cereal she liked and which brand of coffee she always bought, and every reminder landed like a small, unnecessary wound. For a while, I pretended she was just busy, that she would call when things slowed down, that this was another phase we would survive. I kept our last messages on my phone like proof that we had been real, that I hadn't imagined 6 years of shared mornings and shared fears. Then one evening, I saw her photo online. She was standing in front of some glass building, wearing a blazer I had never seen before, smiling the kind of confident smile she used to practice in the mirror before job interviews. The caption was something about new chapter and finally where I belong. Hundreds of people liked it. Strangers congratulated her. I stared at the image and tried to locate myself in that new chapter. I couldn't. That night, I deleted our chat history. Not out of anger, but out of survival. Reading old conversations felt like reading letters from a dead version of myself. I threw myself into work after that. Not because I suddenly became ambitious like her, but because silence was unbearable. I stayed late at the office, volunteered for extra tasks, took on responsibilities I used to avoid. My boss noticed. He said I seemed more focused. I didn't tell him it was because I had nowhere else to put my thoughts. One afternoon, a coworker invited me for a drink. I almost said no, then realized I had no reason to go home. We sat in a bar and talked about projects and deadlines and harmless things. When she asked about my relationship status, I said, recently ended, and surprised myself by not elaborating. It felt like the first time I acknowledged it as a fact instead of a temporary malfunction. Weeks passed, then months. Her name came up less often in my mind, not because I missed her less, but because missing her became background noise. A constant hum instead of a sharp pain. I stopped expecting messages from her. I stopped wondering what time it was where she lived. One night, out of nowhere, she called. I almost didn't answer. I stared at the screen until it stopped vibrating, then called her back before I could change my mind. We talked like old friends who know too much about each other. She told me about her job, her apartment, the city she now called home. I told her about work, about nothing important. We avoided emotional territory like a minefield. Finally, she said, "You sound different." "So do you," I replied. She laughed softly. I guess we both became what we wanted. The word wanted felt inaccurate. I had become what remained. Before hanging up, she said, "I hope you're happy." I didn't lie. I'm learning how to be. After that call, I realized something uncomfortable. The person she was becoming would never fit into the life I was building. And the person I was becoming would always feel too slow for her world. We hadn't just broken up. We had evolved away from each other. A year after she left, I moved to a smaller place closer to my office. I sold some of the furniture we had chosen together. I kept only what felt neutral. I stopped measuring time by when she left and started measuring it by what I was doing now. Sometimes I wondered if she ever regretted choosing her path over me. But the better question was whether I regretted not following her. The answer was complicated. I missed her. I missed the version of us that believed love could grow in any direction. But I didn't miss the anxiety. I didn't miss feeling like a delay in someone else's progress. One evening, while organizing old boxes, I found a notebook from our college days. Inside were lists of future plans we had written together, travel destinations, career goals, a vague idea of family and stability. Our handwriting was tangled on the same pages, optimistic and naive. I closed the notebook and understood something I hadn't before. Those dreams weren't wrong. They just didn't belong to the same timeline anymore. We hadn't failed because we didn't love each other enough. We failed because we wanted different kinds of lives, and neither of us was brave enough to admit it until love became the obstacle. 2 years passed before I saw her again in person. It happened by accident. I was in line at a bookstore, half listening to the cashier while scrolling through my phone, when I heard my name spoken in the exact tone she used when she was surprised. I looked up and there she was, standing a few feet away, holding a stack of books against her chest like a shield. For a second, neither of us moved. We had become images on screens to each other, frozen in time by old memories. In real life, we had aged in small but noticeable ways. Her hair was shorter. My face looked more tired than I remembered. "I didn't know you were back," I said. "I'm visiting," she replied. "Just for a week." We stepped outside together, awkward and cautious, like people meeting after a long argument they never finished. She suggested coffee. I said yes without thinking. At the cafe, we chose a table by the window. Sunlight cut across her face, and for a moment I saw the person I used to wake up next to. Then she checked her phone, and the illusion broke. "So," she said, stirring her drink, "how have you been?" I gave her the edited version. Work was fine. Life was stable. Nothing dramatic. She told me about promotions, about cities she had lived in since we last spoke, about how exhausting it was to always be chasing the next thing. "It sounds like you're doing well," I said. She smiled, but it didn't look like a victory. "It depends on what you mean by well." There was a pause heavy enough to carry years inside it. I thought about you a lot, she admitted, especially in the beginning. Every time something good happened, I wanted to tell you. Why didn't you? I asked. Because I didn't want to hear what it cost you, she said. And I knew it cost you something. That honesty surprised me. We had both been kinder to strangers than to each other. We talked for 2 hours. About old friends. About mistakes. About the people we had almost become. The conversation moved carefully around the obvious question neither of us wanted to ask. What if? Finally, she said it. Do you ever think we could try again? The cafe noise faded. Cups clinked somewhere far away. I saw all the possible futures in her eyes, none of them matching mine. I think if we tried again, I said slowly, we would break up for the same reason. You'd still want to go somewhere. And I'd still want to stay. She looked down at her hands. I don't know how to stop wanting more. I don't know how to want it the way you do. That was the truest thing I could offer her. She nodded, as if confirming something she already suspected. I was afraid you'd say that. We paid separately. Outside, the street looked exactly like it always had, as if our lives had been the only things that moved. Before we parted, she hugged me. It was familiar and foreign at the same time. I'm glad you're okay, she said. So am I replied. That night, I walked home with a strange calm. Seeing her again hadn't reopened the wound. It had closed a door I hadn't realized was still open. Over the next few days, I replayed the conversation in my head. Not with regret, but with clarity. The fantasy version of us had survived longer than the real one. We had kept each other alive in memory because memory didn't have to choose a direction. I realized how much I had shaped my life in opposition to hers. I had defined myself as not like her, when what I really wanted was simply like me. I didn't need to compete with her ambition or apologize for my pace. A month later, I was offered a promotion at work. Not a dramatic one, but meaningful. More responsibility. A chance to lead a small team. I accepted without imagining how she would react. That felt new. I started dating again after that. Slowly, without comparing. I learned to say what I wanted earlier instead of assuming love would translate for me. Sometimes, late at night, I still wondered where she was and what she was building. I hoped she had found something that felt like arrival instead of motion. But I no longer felt like the person she left behind. I felt like someone who had stayed and learned how to grow roots. The first relationship I tried to build after her ended badly, and not because the other person did anything wrong. It failed because I was still measuring distance instead of presence. I kept waiting for signs of departure, for ambition that would pull someone away from me. When it didn't happen, I grew restless, suspicious of calm. It took me a long time to understand that I had learned the wrong lesson from our breakup. I thought loving someone meant preparing for them to leave. In reality, it meant choosing someone whose idea of staying matched mine. I met Clara at a work conference. She wasn't part of the industry I was in. She worked for a nonprofit that coordinated housing projects with architectural firms. We were seated next to each other during a panel discussion, and she made sarcastic notes in the margins of the program. When I noticed, she showed them to me without embarrassment. It felt easy in a way I wasn't used to anymore. We talked about work, but not like people trying to impress each other. She told me what frustrated her. I told her what bored me. There was no performance in it. When the conference ended, she asked if I wanted to get dinner. I almost said I was busy, out of instinct, then stopped myself and said yes. Our relationship grew slowly. No sudden declarations. No dramatic turning points. Just accumulation. Shared routines. Groceries together. Arguments about small things that never turned into wars. She asked me once what had happened with my last long-term relationship, and I told her the truth, that we wanted different lives and didn't admit it until it was too late. Do you still want the same things you wanted back then? She asked. I want fewer things, I said, but I want them more clearly. She liked that answer. One night, months into our relationship, we were lying on her couch when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. My boss wants me to apply for a position abroad, she said. 6 months in another country. It's a good opportunity. My chest tightened without permission. She noticed. That scares you, doesn't it? It reminds me, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I don't want to go if it means losing this. The words landed gently, but they carried weight. No one had ever said that to me without making it sound like sacrifice. You shouldn't turn down something important because of me, I said. I'm not, she replied. I'm choosing something important. It just happens to be here. That was when I understood what compatibility actually looked like. Not identical dreams, but dreams that didn't cancel each other out. A few weeks later, I ran into my ex again, this time not by accident. She messaged me saying she was in town and asked if I wanted to meet. I hesitated before answering, then agreed. I didn't feel fear this time, just curiosity. We met at a bar near the train station. She looked tired in a different way than before. Less sharp, more human. I heard you got promoted, she said. Congratulations. Thanks, I replied. I heard you're thinking about leaving your company. She laughed. News travels. We talked about work, about cities, about people we no longer knew. Then she said, do you ever wonder what would have happened if one of us had given in? I didn't answer right away. I think one of us would have become smaller, I said, and the other would have pretended not to notice. She nodded slowly. I used to think love meant never standing still. And I used to think love meant never moving, I said. We smiled at the symmetry of it. When we parted, she hugged me longer than necessary. I'm glad you didn't become me, she said. I'm glad you didn't become me either, I answered. Walking home, I realized how strange it was that we had needed years apart to finally understand each other. The conflict hadn't been between us. It had been between who we were and who we were trying to be for each other. That night, Clara was waiting for me with takeout and a movie already paused halfway through. I sat next to her, and she leaned against my shoulder without asking where I had been. I thought about how, once, love had felt like chasing. Now it felt like standing next to someone and knowing neither of us was being pulled away. The year Clara and I moved in together was the first time my life felt quiet in a way that didn't mean empty. We argued about where to put the bookshelf and whether plants were a responsibility or a decoration. We learned each other's bad habits and didn't treat them like flaws that needed fixing. I stopped waiting for a turning point that would prove everything was temporary. Still, my past didn't disappear. It just lost its power to interrupt the present. Every now and then, I would see my ex's name on a conference flyer or in a professional article someone shared online. She had shifted careers slightly, consulting instead of running. Less constant travel, more stability. I wondered if that change had come from exhaustion or wisdom. I never asked. Clara noticed when something lingered in my thoughts. She never accused me of missing someone else. She asked what I was thinking about and waited for the answer. That, more than anything, made me want to stay honest. One evening, she said, I've been offered a permanent position with my organization. It's here, same city, but it means I'll be busier. I felt a small flicker of fear, then something steadier underneath it. Busier how? More responsibility. Longer hours sometimes. But not gone. I nodded. We can work with that. We meant it. We did. Life became a series of ordinary decisions that added up to something solid. We saved money. We planned trips that actually happened. We talked about the future without treating it like a negotiation. When we disagreed, it was about how to build, not whether to build. One afternoon, I found the old notebook again, the one with our college dreams. I almost threw it away, then stopped. I added a new page. What I want now. A home that doesn't feel like a pause. Work that doesn't erase the rest of my life. A person who walks in the same direction, even if at a different speed. It felt less like ambition and more like alignment. Months later, my ex called unexpectedly. Not for small talk. For advice. I don't know how to stop, she said. I keep thinking the next job will finally feel like enough. Does it? I asked. Not really. There was something vulnerable in her voice I hadn't heard before. I realized how much pressure she had put on herself to become a version of success that never arrived. Maybe enough isn't a place, I said. Maybe it's a structure. Something you build around yourself instead of ahead of yourself. She was quiet. You sound settled. I am, I said. And for the first time, it didn't feel like an apology. We ended the call gently, like people who had finished a long conversation they started years ago. That night, Clara and I cooked together. She talked about a project that frustrated her. I complained about a design revision that made no sense. We laughed at the wrong moments in the movie we put on. Nothing dramatic happened, and that felt like proof. I understood then that the opposite of ambition wasn't stagnation. It was presence. And presence was something I had never learned to value until I lost someone who lived in the future. Sometimes I think about how our lives might have looked if we had chosen differently. If I had moved. If she had stayed. But those questions don't hurt anymore. They feel like alternate versions of a story that taught me what direction meant. We hadn't gone in opposite directions because one of us was wrong. We had done it because we were trying to reach different definitions of arrival. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was already where I was supposed to be. The final message from her came on an ordinary Tuesday. No dramatic timing, no special occasion. Just a name on my screen I no longer flinched at. I'm moving again, she wrote. Different country this time. I wanted to tell you before I disappear into another time zone. I read it twice before answering. Are you excited? I asked. I think so, she replied. But I'm also tired of starting over. That was new. Once, she had loved beginnings. Now they sounded heavy. We met one last time before she left. Not out of nostalgia, but out of respect for the history we shared. We chose a small cafe near the river, the kind of place people went to when they didn't need to rush anywhere. She looked older. Not in years, but in expression. There was less urgency in her eyes, less need to prove something. I used to think movement meant progress, she said, stirring her drink. But sometimes it just means you don't want to stop long enough to feel disappointed. I nodded. I used to think staying meant fear. Now I think it just means you've decided what matters. She smiled faintly. We really did become opposites. Not opposites, I said. Just accurate. She laughed at that. Then she grew serious. I don't regret choosing my career, she said. But I regret thinking love would wait until I was done becoming someone. I felt the weight of those words settle between us, not as blame, but as truth. I don't regret not following you, I said. But I regret that we thought one of us had to lose for the other to win. We sat in silence for a while, watching people pass outside the window. Strangers with unknown priorities, unknown futures. Do you think we were ever wrong? She asked. I think we were honest too late, I said, and then honest all at once. When we stood to leave, she hugged me gently, without desperation. I hope you keep choosing the life you want, she said. I hope you learn how to rest inside yours, I replied. After she left, I walked home instead of taking the bus. I needed the distance. I needed the time. Clara was cooking when I got back. She asked how the meeting went, and I told her. Not every detail, but the important part. She's still looking for where she belongs, I said. And you? Clara asked. I looked around our kitchen. The mismatched mugs. The plant she kept alive despite claiming she couldn't. The calendar on the wall with plans that didn't involve escape. I think I already found it. That night, as we got ready for bed, I remembered something my ex had said years ago, that she wanted more. At the time, I thought more meant higher, faster, farther. Now I understood that more could also mean deeper. I didn't hate the version of myself who loved her. I didn't resent the years we lost trying to want the same future. They taught me how fragile alignment was and how necessary. Our dreams had gone in opposite directions, but they hadn't been enemies. They had been signposts, pointing us toward different kinds of meaning. She would keep moving. I would keep building. Neither of us was wrong. We just weren't meant to arrive at the same place.